Hi, it's Gwen Lehman with the last of my Pastor Blunt stories. This one is called A Coca-Cola and a Cigarette. It took a moment for her to miss him after he'd gone. She'd been staring so intently at herself in the vanity mirror that she did not mark his exit. Though once she did, she had no fear that he would not come back. He'd be back, with a cold-as-ice Coca-Cola and a photoplay magazine. She needed that Coca-Cola. She was simply parched, and she had to have something to look at while he drove. Where he would drive them to, she had not a clue. A faraway rumble of thunder broke her spell. She turned from the mirror after reminding herself that she needed to pick up some true red lipstick. Her tube was almost used up. The thunder worried her. If it rained, Leroy would not want to stop. He would just keep driving and driving and driving that Buick until they reached whatever destination he had in his mind that day. He would refuse to stop and let her run into a nice department store, pick up a new lipstick, maybe get a pair of cute capri pants and a halter top. She knew he'd enjoy seeing her in a halter top. Sue Dean stopped thinking for a moment and looked at the pale yellow dress spread out on the mussed-up bed. Well, perhaps she should go ahead and put it on, hot as she was. Surprise Leroy. Take his arm when he got back, cross over to that diner. Watch him eat a big old plate full of eggs and grits, sausage, and sweet potato biscuits. As for herself, she'd have a Coca-Cola and a cigarette, breakfast and lunch. Mrs. Sue Dean Wells had begun to fear that the life she had chosen to escape into with Pastor Leroy Blunt might make her fat. They were feasting on a regular basis. Big, thick old slabs of steak, fried chicken, gumbo, spiced-up shrimp, lots of grits, and Lord Almighty, how many syrup-soaked pancakes they'd eaten she could hardly tell. She was certainly enjoying herself, and wanted to be sure Pastor Leroy was enjoying himself as well. That he continued to enjoy himself might depend on her not developing pudgy cheeks, an extra chin, ham-hock thighs. Mrs. Wells might be a dreamer, she told herself, but the only dreams that last were the ones you'd thought out real good. She'd begun to think about Leroy Blunt from the day he opened his church in an old storefront downtown in Angier. Not that she'd been looking for a church. She was Baptist, always had been. But when she saw Leroy Blunt on that ladder, sweat soaking through his shirt, broad back, strong arms nailing up the fellowship banner, she was hooked. He had finally found Jesus. That she'd been married for 3 years then to Darrell Tupelo Wells did not cross her mind when she saw Leroy in that ladder. Her marriage did not seem in any way an impediment to her intentions, and her intentions were clear to her. First chance she got, she would run off with the man standing high up on that ladder. Of course, this notion, which had struck her with all the force of a blow to the head, might be highly dependent upon the relinquishment of her Baptist faith, Sue Dean Wells realized. After all, she could read and had read that banner in its entirety, long as it was. As she had never been quite sure that she'd believed what she'd believed in as a Baptist, she was fairly certain she would not be troubled by guilt over betraying that faith if the man she'd fallen for proved to be the Church of the Living Stones, Word of God, Sanctuary, and Fellowship pastor, and not a hired handyman. All the better if he was a man of God, thought Sue Dean Wells. Nobody could fault her for that. Pastor Leroy Blunt had turned his head then, looked down to where she stood, transfixed, holding a sack of onions and sweet potato pie. She had been certain in that instant the same notion that was in her head had lodged itself in his. When he smiled that slow smile, she knew they were both on the same page of the good news book. And so they were. That's how it began and led to this. Sue Dean Wells barefoot, lightly powdered in a silky white slip, waiting for the man from the ladder to come back to the motel with a cold Coca-Cola and a photoplay magazine. He'd soon zip her into that new dress he'd bought her, and they'd hit the road, rain or shine. Who knew where? Where didn't matter. She had a new faith, and she had Pastor Leroy Blunt. That thunder she heard was way off in the distance. And that's the end of my stories. They will probably all make sense to you if you listen to them rather close in time, as they follow one right after the other. I hope you enjoy this series of stories. Sometime soon, I'll be reading you some more. Thanks.